Well, good morning, brothers and sisters at Grace Bible Chapel. Again, this morning we're just going to continue on where we left off in the book of Daniel yesterday, looking at these three men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Those were their Babylonian names that were given them, but they were Jewish. They were the tribe of Judah. They were in exile, abducted from their home country, brought to Babylon, forced into service to the king, and they had done well, and they were promoted, and they were effective at what they had done, but they still honored the Lord. They still honored God, and because of that, when Nebuchadnezzar created a golden image of himself for everybody to bow down and worship, and the music would play, and they refused to do it, their lives were in jeopardy. Yesterday we looked at that, not just their trust in God, that they trusted God. They trusted that God could save them. And that's even what they said to Nebuchadnezzar when Nebuchadnezzar said, "Is there any God who can deliver you from my hands?" And they said, "No, God can. But even if he doesn't." But even, that idea, but even if he doesn't, but if not, was the exact phrase. They're still not going to worship. So it wasn't just their faith in God and their trust in God, but also their loyalty to God that we looked at yesterday. That they were not going to bow down and worship other gods, and in this extremely hostile culture to their own faith and to who they are. And so we continue the story on, because here they are in this precarious situation. When Nebuchadnezzar's given them the second chance and they don't take it. And what happens? The Bible tells us that he was enraged, that the king was enraged at this response. And he ordered that the furnace the furnace that they were going to be tossed into be stoked up to being many times hotter than it normally would. So much to the point where the men who would open the furnace and toss Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in themselves were killed by the flames and the heat coming out of the furnace. And so there's a couple of points that I want to make in this story, because Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they were tossed into the fiery furnace. And I can imagine what that must have been like for them, what they must have gone through their mind. They had faith that God could save them, but they also knew that God may choose not to. And, I can imagine that even in their strong faith, there must have been fear as the doors to that furnace were opened. And as they were bound and taken to be tossed into that furnace. And this is an important message to us about trials, about the fiery trials that we go through, about the difficulties that we go through. That God did not spare Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego from being tossed into the flames. He didn't change Nebuchadnezzar's mind. He didn't miraculously take them out of the situation. He didn't stay the hand of the guards. None of those things happened. They were tossed into the furnace. And for us in life, God does not promise that he will take trials away from us. He does not promise that we will not have to go through difficult things, that we will not have to go through suffering, that we will not have to go through trial. But one thing that God does promise is the thing that he did with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that he will go through the fire with us. And so even as these soldiers were killed as they tossed these three men in, shortly after, Nebuchadnezzar looks into the furnace and he sees something. He's amazed because he doesn't see them being consumed. In fact, he asks the question, didn't we not throw three men in? Why do I see four? And this is what he says in Daniel chapter 3. It says, "Then Nebuchadnezzar was astonished," this is verse 24, "and rose up in haste, and he declared to his counselors, 'Did we not cast three men bound into the fire?' And they answered and said to the king, 'True, O king.' And they answered and said, 'But I see four men unbound and walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt. And the appearance of the fourth is like a son of the gods.'" And so here we see, and this is a picture of Christ in the Old Testament. as he is with Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego through the fire. And he keeps them through the fire. And he goes with them through the fire. And Nebuchadnezzar is amazed by this, and he calls out to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and he calls them out of the flames, and they walk out, and their clothes are not burnt. They don't even smell like smoke. And the king of Babylon, the most powerful man in the most powerful kingdom in the earth, who had just made a statue of himself for everyone else to worship, then praises the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And he makes a decree. He makes this decree in verse 29. He says, "Therefore I make a decree, any people, nation, or language that speaks anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be torn limb from limb, and their houses lay in ruin, for there is no other God who is able to rescue in this way." And so we see how God goes through them, with them, through the flames. But he doesn't take them out of the situation. They have to go through the trial. And because of their faith and because of their loyalty to God, God is glorified in this. Ultimately, that's the result. That the most powerful man in the most powerful kingdom on earth ends up praising God in this completely pagan, polytheistic, idol-worshipping culture. The God of heaven ends up being praised, and he gets the glory. And that tends to be what happens when we put our trust in God and we allow him to walk through with us through the trials that we go through. So I just pray that this is an encouragement to you this morning. We're going to continue this week to look at just some different stories from the book of Daniel. Wednesday, which would be tomorrow, the holiday, I'm not going to be making a video for tomorrow, but I'll make one for Thursday and for Friday of this week. God bless and have a good day.